We're talking today with Jim Hallberg of Muskegon, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Hallberg, can you begin by telling us a little bit about your own background?
Well, I was born in Detroit on January 11th, 1920, and was raised there until we moved several areas in Detroit area. My father was a traveling man, and we moved different places in the state of Michigan.
Okay. What kind of work did your father do?
My dad was a fire insurance specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And was he able to keep that job through the 30s?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Right. And let's see, but you stayed in the Detroit area then while you were in school?
We lived in Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
we lived in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
we lived in Royal Oak,
Mm-hmm.
and we lived in Grosse Pointe.
Okay. And how long did you stay in school?
Through high school.
So you finished high school.
And I was ready to go into college, and Uncle Sam called. And said, you go into the service.
Okay. Well, now, in what year did you graduate from high school?
1939.
Okay. In which high school did you graduate from?
Muskegon High School.
Okay. So you were over on this end of the state by
Yes.
that time. Okay. So now you were drafted in the fall of 42.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do between the time you finished high school and when you were in the Army?
I worked for Bennett Pumps in the office
Mm-hmm.
of Bennett Pumps.
And were you trying to save money to go to college, or?
Yes, and was taking some courses at Muskegon Junior College
Mm-hmm.
at that time, and then Uncle Sam said, no, it's time for you to go.
All right. Now, do you remember how you first heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was in Fort Worth, Texas, bowling, believe it or not.
Okay.
This is before the war started,
Mm-hmm.
and I was bowling, and we were with a bunch of people that were church goers,
Mm-hmm.
and we met there at their home. There was Sun Oil Company,
Mm-hmm.
and we went bowling that evening, and while we were bowling, the military come in and said, anybody that is in the service, head back for your base immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we were dressed in civilian clothes,
Mm-hmm.
because there was no war on yet.
Well, you weren't in the Army yet, though, right?
I was in the Army, yes.
Okay. I guess, I'm sorry, when we took down your information, you told me you were drafted in 1942.
Mhm.
Okay. But you were drafted then in 41? So before Pearl Harbor?
Right.
Yes,
Oh,
we had,
okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Make sure that I get that correct on there. Okay, so okay. In that case,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. Well, I know
Yeah.
this check. Okay, that is sort of important.
Actually, it was October 13th,
Right.
1941.
Right. Okay, so, and actually, that being the case, okay, let's then back up the story a little bit. You got your draft notice in October 41?
Yeah.
Okay, and so then where did you report to first?
The first we reported to Muskegon Armory,
Mhm.
there was 118 of us. And then we went from there to Kalamazoo for medical
Examination.
examination. And then from there we went to Battle Creek. And then from Battle Creek we were sent to different portions. Some of us went to Camp Walters, Texas. Some of us went on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But I happened to go into Camp Walters,
Okay.
Texas.
Now, before you were drafted, were you paying much attention to what was going on in the world, to the war in Europe and those things?
Oh yes, with reading the newspapers, you couldn't help it.
Because there were some of the guys that I've interviewed really weren't paying much attention to that, and then all of a sudden the war happened. And did you think that sooner or later we might get into it?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So when this happens, it's not a complete surprise. Maybe
No.
the way it happens is a little bit, but
Well, we knew that the draft was on,
Mhm.
and we didn't know when we were going.
right.
My brother was in the very first draft, and I was in the second.
Hmm.
So
Okay. Now, you get sent down to Camp Walters, Texas, and that's near Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then describe a little bit what the basic training was like.
Well, everything that the Army knew about training soldiers at that time. And we went out and bivouacked and we hiked and all that sort of thing for strength and just being given the knowledge of a service.
Mm-hmm. And how did you hold up with all the physical work and so forth? Did you do that okay?
Oh yeah. Well, when a young fellow.
All right. Well, I don't know. Was it? Did you have trouble adjusting to the heat or things like that, or because it was the right time of year, so it wasn't so bad?
No.
All right. How did you do with the Army discipline?
No problem.
Okay. Now, were there people you were training alongside who had problems either with the discipline or the physical work?
No. Now, this is one thing that I want to impress. My niece counsels these men that have been come back from these places, and people are killing themselves, committing suicide, and all of the whole time that I was over there and in action, and we never found a person that had done something to themselves and involved their personal life by trying to commit suicide. Never heard of that. I never heard it until I talked to my niece.
Well, it didn't happen even back in the Second World War, if you look at the larger history.
Probably
but
did,
not in your experience.
but I
Right.
never
Okay.
got associated with
All right. Well, I was actually asking about something a little bit simpler than that. And that was just as these young men coming in from civilian life go into military training, they're both being physically worked pretty hard, and they're being made to follow rules and follow orders.
At first it was difficult. Sure it was. Because you were adjusted to orientation. And what they said in those days was kind of, oh, wait a minute, what do you want me to do? And pretty soon you were doing it.
Now, did you ever get assigned KP or anything else like that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Right.
Everything that went with the service.
All right. How did the drill instructors treat you at that point?
Fine. They were super people. Yeah, they were super. Some of them were even American Indians.
Okay. About how old do you think they were? Were they older than you, or?
Probably 23, 24, something like that.
But still young men. They weren't World War I veterans or anything like that. Okay. All right. So how long did you spend in that basic training phase?
13 weeks.
Okay. And so it's during that 13 weeks that the Pearl Harbor announcement comes up?
Yes.
Okay.
That's when we were in Fort Worth when we heard it.
Okay. So then the announcement comes up, all military men go back to base. And what was the atmosphere like when you got back to the base?
Everybody was excited. They didn't have the communication that they got nowadays. They just said that the Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor and that the war was on.
All right. Now at this point, are you assigned to a regular unit yet, or are you still waiting for assignment?
Waiting for assignment. We went from the 13 weeks basic training, and they put us on trains and headed, some of them went west and some went east. And I happened to be one of the ones that went east, and we went to Fort Dix.
Okay, so you go to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and then what was at Fort Dix?
That's a regular training area.
But did you join a unit at that point? Was there a unit forming there?
Yes, we were a replacement personnel to the unit.
Okay. Now what unit were you joining? What unit were you joining?
We were joining the 34th Division, 135th Infantry.
Okay. Now the 34th Division, that was a National Guard unit, right?
Yes.
So
from
explain.
Minnesota, Iowa, North and South Dakota.
Okay. And then what did they need replacements for?
Personnel. They were just they inducted these guys, put them in active duty again, and they were just fellows that were members of the National Guard. And when the war started, the United States put these people all back in active duty.
Mm-hmm. And then they had to add the replacements to bring the units up to full strength.
Absolutely, bring it up to strength.
Okay. Now, was there any tension between these guardsmen and the new guys?
Absolutely not.
Okay. What kind of reception did you get when you joined your company?
Oh, great, great.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, or about what happened when you got there?
We had to get acquainted with these other fellows that were all Midwesterners, so it wasn't too hard a job. And there's several of them that we became very, very close friends with. And I can remember one fellow, he lived in Iowa, and his father had a big farm, and his father wrote him a letter or a telegram telling him that they had just sold a whole bunch of cattle or whatever there was, and that his son had a big nest egg coming to him when he came home.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, what kind of training were you getting once you were at Fort Dix?
The same as we got in Camp Walters, Texas.
Okay. Now, did you have regular weapons to use yet? Did you have the modern weapons, or did you have older ones?
M1 rifles, Browning automatics, and machine guns. And I happened to be an unlucky one that got a Browning automatic, which was real heavy.
Oh, all right. And okay, so you're doing weapons training. Did you train on mortars as well, or just
No,
automatic?
No, I wasn't in the small arms.
Mm-hmm.
I was just small arms.
Right.
No.
Okay. Now, did you go on large maneuvers with the whole division at once, or smaller units, or?
Sometimes they would use the whole group, and sometimes they would send one fraction of their complement to this particular type of training, and some other guys were on another type.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that time, the United States didn't know all about the warfare at the time.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to North Africa, it was strange.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you're getting that kind of. Now, did you get any specialized training, like amphibious training or things like that?
No.
Okay, just regular infantry stuff.
Yeah,
All right. Now, you're based in New Jersey. You're not too far from New York. Did you get to go to New York City?
We went on our honeymoon.
All right. So you were already engaged by this time?
We were engaged, and then she came to visit down in Texas, and thinking we were going to get married there, and we didn't. And when she came to Fort Dix, I was ready to get married, and she didn't bring her ring. So we were married in the Methodist Church, and what was his name?
Right outside of Murphy's. I can't remember the name.
Reverend Noman was the minister, but the
It was a congregational church.
no, it was a Methodist church. It was a Methodist church. I'm sorry.
All right. So you get married just sort of off the base, and how long did they give you for a honeymoon?
we had
2 days.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and we spent that in New York City.
Mm-hmm. All right.
How much a room cost us that night?
Huh?
How much did your hotel room cost?
Our whole the hotel room was $4.
All right.
I got a receipt.
And-
Home.
we had made reservations at the Woodstock Hotel, which we had several of the service guys. We went into New York just to see New York and stuff, and we always stayed at the Woodstock Hotel, which was off Times Square, and they always were ready. Oh, we were tickled to death to have us there. And when we made reservations for our wedding to stay there, there was no room. So they took us to Great Northern Hotel and paid the taxi and paid the drivers, and we paid the hotel room, which was $4.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like a pretty good deal at any rate.
Yeah.
Now, did your wife then stay out in New Jersey as long as you stayed at Fort Dix?
Just
Okay.
how long were
I
you?
was only there 2 days when they shut down the camp, and we girls had to go in the chapel, and they had an armed guard marching up and down the aisles, and they wouldn't let any correspondence go out because they didn't want anyone to know that there was going to be this big ship out of the
All right.
guys. And so we sat in the chapel, and then the next morning we were sent home out of the camp, and the boys were marched off to war.
All right. So you no sooner got married than suddenly the orders come that you're all shipping out. All right.
On the Aquitania.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in April. Let's see, we went across the North Sea in April, so you know that was rough waters, and it was the largest convoy at that time.
Right, because it's April of 42. It's still at the point when we're beginning to build up in England and send more and more ships over.
Right.
All right. Tell me about the ship you were on, the Aquitania. Tell me about the ship.
The ship, the first, when we got in there, they had these bunks in tiers. And I said, well, I'm going to grab the top bunk, the bottom bunk, so I wouldn't have to climb up to the top. After we'd been out 2 days, I was on the top bunk, not at the bottom bunk.
So what was the problem with the bottom bunk?
You know what the problem was.
I might, but the audience might like to know.
Yeah.
So explain a little bit. What happened to those guys when they got on the
You
ship?
got seasick.
Mm-hmm. And so the top bunk was better for...
And as a British ship, the food was altogether different than we were normally used to.
All right. Now, about how many men do you think they had on that ship?
I think it was about 4,200.
Because it's a converted ocean liner.
Yes,
it's a very big boat.
Aquitania was a big boat.
Now, and then you sailed with a convoy. The seas were rough. Did you have any U-boat scares while you were crossing?
Oh yeah, the U-boats were skimming in and out between the convoy, because it was one of the largest convoys to go across at first. And so every once in a while there was, you could tell they were throwing tin cans at those German U-boats. But we got into Northern Ireland, okay.
As far as you know, were any of the ships in the convoy hit, or wouldn't they tell you?
No.
Okay.
There were if there was somebody hit, it was away from where we were.
All right. Now, was the weather bad for most of the trip? Or just for certain parts of it?
The seas were high.
Yeah.
Yeah, the seas were high.
Because that also could make it a little bit harder for the U-boats. The rougher the water was.
I don't really know. I don't really know.
Okay. But anyway, about how long did it take to get across the ocean?
I can't tell you now.
How did you spend your time?
It was probably 14, 15 days.
Yeah, that'd be about right for a big convoy.
Yeah.
How did you spend your time when you were on the boat? What did you do?
Well, we had firing of our weapons away from our convoy, but otherwise it's just calisthenics to keep you in shape.
All right. Okay, and then how many meals a day would you get when you were on the boat? They feed you twice? Yeah.
2.
All right.
And most of them was British food.
Okay. Now you come to Northern Ireland. Did you land in Belfast or Londonderry or?
Well, when we were in Northern Ireland, they formed several groups of us as American Rangers to go in on missions to Algiers.
Mhm.
And on the way to Algiers, we were on a MHS Sheffield cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the military men, other than sailors, wore sailor suits. They took our regular uniforms away so that if anybody saw us, they would think it was just British. But when we got to Gibraltar, after we left Gibraltar, we went back into our regular uniform.
Okay. Now let's back up a little bit. Go back to the point when you land in Northern Ireland, because that's still the spring of '42. It's a few months before the landings in North Africa.
Right.
All right.
We landed November 8th, 1942.
Right. But in Northern Ireland, when did you arrive there? Was that in April or May or?
It was in April.
Okay. And then where did you go, or where did you stay in Northern Ireland?
We stayed in Quonset huts outside of Belfast.
Mm-hmm. All right.
In fact, I'll tell you a little secret. A buddy of mine, I was a golfer, and my whole family were golfers. And when we got over in Ireland, a fellow by the name of Monk Morrison, who was the pro at the Greensboro Country Club in Greensboro, North Carolina. And we went over, he says, Jim, let's go over and see if we can't get a game of golf in while we're in between our guard duties. And so we went over there. When they found out he was a card-carrying pro, they gave us balls, clubs, everything, and we played every day that we could, where the weather was good or we didn't have activity. Isn't that something?
Well, that's a pretty good deal.
Later on, he was injured by a grenade, and I never knew what happened to him after that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, aside from playing golf, what else were you doing in Northern Ireland? Were you just training, or?
Training,
Okay.
mostly training.
Now, at what point are you selected to become one of these guys who will fight as a ranger?
When we first went over there, they divided groups, and there was 660, 690 in each group, and there was 3 groups. Mm-hmm. And enough to fill the Broke and the Malcolm.
Those were the destroyers that were going to go in?
Yeah.
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 All right. And do you have any idea why you were picked?
No.
I didn't tell you. They just gave you an order?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got orders, and then we followed them.
Okay. Now, before you got on the boats to head off toward Gibraltar, did you know anything about the mission you were going to have? No. Okay.
We knew that we were going to make an invasion in Algiers, but we didn't know much about it, except that just before we got there, these 2 destroyers had special built bows on them to break the barriers to get into the port. Mm-hmm. And that's all we knew.
Okay. So you go down, you get to Gibraltar. At what point do they put you on the destroyers? Was that at Gibraltar or later?
At Gibraltar.
Okay. And so now they've got you on these destroyers. You get back in your regular uniforms again.
Yeah.
All right. And what did they tell you at that point about what your job was going to be?
Well, we knew the missions. They had spelled out the missions that you were supposed to accomplish when you got on shore.
Right.
Because they knew, with intelligence, they knew what the harbor was like. And that's about the size of it.
Okay. Now, do you remember what you were supposed to do or what the assignment
Yes.
was?
We captured our objective. The group of 12 of us capture our objectives, and then they gave told us if we got a signal from the one of the two destroyers to come back, they would let us know if things weren't working out. Well, they did, and the broker, the Malcolm, can't remember which one was blown out of the water from the shore battery. So we didn't know. We got halfway back there, and then we started fighting to save our soul in this pulpwood storage place. And then when they set it on fire, you couldn't bat it.
Okay. Now, when you were coming into the, so basically what's happening is they're sending in 2 old destroyers into Algiers harbor with the idea of breaking through the breakwaters or the barriers so you
Right.
could land directly there.
Uh-huh.
Now, do you remember which destroyer you were on?
Malcolm.
You were on the Malcolm. All right. And then did the Bork then blow up before it got there, or did they both get to the
I
breakwater?
don't know. They were back of us, so
Okay.
I don't remember. But I was the very first person to step on shore in Algiers
Okay.
out of our group.
Now, did they put you in small boats to land first?
No. They went right up to the dock and I jumped off
Ah, okay. Now, was that by plan or by accident that you got
by
off?
plan.
Okay. So you're jumping off, and then what are you supposed to do?
And we were supposed to go to our particular area that we were supposed to capture.
Okay.
And we did.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nobody there.
Okay. Now, when the boat came in, was anyone shooting at the boat?
There was what?
Was anyone shooting at the boat while you were on
Oh,
it?
sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, can I
Yes.
say something?
Yeah.
Is that turned off now? Just for a minute, Jim? I noticed you're fidgeting.
All right. So we had you in Algiers, and you landed. So when you were moving on shore initially, there was no one shooting at you. You were just got off on the dock and took off.
Yeah, they weren't shooting at us as individuals.
Right.
They were shooting at the boat,
Okay.
really.
All right. Now, had you been told anything about what to expect from the French? No, you didn't know whether they would fight or not.
No,
Was there any suggestion that they would not fight?
no.
Okay. Because that was part of the plan that was going on, but they didn't tell you about
They
that
didn't
part.
tell us.
All right.
We knew that there was a group coming in from the west and a group coming in from the east, but we didn't know who they were,
Right.
which divisions,
Mhm.
which part of our division.
Right. Okay. So then what happens? So initially you go back to your place, and then you get the signal to come back toward the boat, and then about halfway back you get under fire. All right. And then did you make it back to the boat, or did you just stay
No,
where you were?
never got back to the boat.
Okay. So what happened
got
to
into this pulpwood area,
Mhm.
and we fought them off with the guy. That was the first thing they wanted to know where our artillery was. We didn't have artillery.
So you put up enough fire that they thought
Yeah.
they were fighting more than they were.
Yeah,
Okay. And about how long did you last before you had to surrender?
9 hours.
Okay. And then when you surrendered, was that on orders from somewhere else, or what happened?
Well, when our colonel said, when they set us on fire, we couldn't cope with it anymore. He said, we'll give up. And so we did,
Mhm.
and they took us up the side of it was like Algiers is built on a curve like this. They took us up to the prison. It's an Arab prison.
So what did the prison look like? How was it built?
I can't tell
Was
you
it
now.
sort of brick or stone or just?
Yeah, it was brick
Mhm.
stone.
So kind of an old-fashioned prison.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Not just a barbed wire compound or
No,
something. Okay. And about how many of you do you think were being taken off there?
well, there was 600 and some in our outfit, and in our group,
Mhm.
and there was 2 groups of these. So I don't know about the other group.
Okay, but most of your group was
Yeah.
captured at that point.
And after we got out of there, our people put us in a housing in a, it was like a, oh, they call it Maison Curie. It was a housing project, and they put us in these houses, and they had mosaic floors, ice cold in November, and I got strep throat. I wound up in the hospital with strep throat, and I told this British medical officer, I said, I shouldn't be here. They're bringing guys in off ships that were really in bad shape. He said, don't you worry a thing about it. With what you've got is as serious as some of these wounds. And I was in there about 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to our outfit.
All right.
But they had us sleeping on these mosaic ice cold floor. We didn't, they took in our blankets and jackets and whatever.
Right, because you didn't have any of your own equipment at that point.
No.
Okay. Now, while you were a prisoner of the French, how did the French treat you?
Okay, they treated us okay. But they knew what was coming.
Mm-hmm.
They knew what was coming.
Yeah. And then pretty soon these guys are now your allies.
No. And after we got through with that business, our division put us on MP duty. So we drove around in jeeps, watching our own people. You know.
Now, what did you have to watch for? Were that your own
Trouble with the French.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there was with the Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are they're going crazy going after a woman, see? I don't know why, but the Arabs didn't like that at all.
Well, they had customs that were quite different.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you had to make sure your own men behaved and didn't get into fights and things. Now, were there parts of Algiers where the men were not supposed to go at all?
Yes, yeah. And there are a lot of places that our officers told us stay away from, even when you were with MP duties. You just stay away from that area. There's a Kasbah,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all Arabs. And the Arabs were different people. Well, you know, they got that problem right now. They don't know what those people are over there. They're a bunch of weirdos.
Well,
Tell what you think.
It's from
there
what
were,
I see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things going on, but part of it too was that in Algeria in particular, they really didn't like the French.
No.
And so there was bad blood already, and you were coming in on top of it, and so
Yeah.
they weren't going to like you either. And they were also, most of them, desperately poor, which didn't help.
Right.
So it made a lot for an MP to have to watch out for.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Now, about how long do you think you spent on that kind of duty? A month or so?
Probably 5 weeks, and then we headed east towards Rommel's area.
Mm-hmm. You're heading up toward Tunisia. And how did they move you? Did you walk? Did you have trucks?
Sometimes walking, most of the times on 6x6.
Okay. Now, what did the countryside look like that you were traveling through?
It's like you see on the TV right now.
It would be.
It's Arab, dry, desert like. And at one time, I got pictures of my buddies, and it snowed so hard, we had overcoats on, and snow piled on our shoulder. I got pictures like that at home.
Okay. So in the winter, it will snow there. And
Yeah, they
and
had snow in North Africa, yeah.
Okay. And did you have other problems with mud or rain or things like that too?
Oh, everything, just like any place else.
Okay. And did you have to sleep out on the ground in the mud or?
Well, wherever you could find a place to rest your butt.
All right. Now, about how long were you on the move, do you think? Days, weeks?
Probably 4 weeks.
Okay.
And then we got caught at Kasserine Pass and Fondue Pass, and that's where our big fight was, when we met up with Rommel's main force.
Right. Now, what was the first sign that you had of the Germans, or what was the first German activity that you witnessed?
The ones that we captured.
Okay, and where or how did you capture some Germans?
Just, they gave up.
Okay,
A lot of them were Germans and Italian. They just gave up. And when they found out that the force that they were going to go up against was bigger than they thought.
okay. So when you were first advancing, you were capturing prisoners, and that seemed pretty successful.
Yeah,
All right.
I've got pictures of them too.
Okay, all right. And then, now was there a point where you were given orders to stop and dig in, or
No.
how did the Kasserine fight start from your perspective? What happened that day?
Well, they had plans to go to Kasserine Pass and Hallberg Pass. Those were two entries to the German area, and that's where we went.
Okay. Now, at the point when the Germans counterattack in that area, but can you describe a little bit what you saw happen that day, or what went on around you?
Well, the first time was a night attack. They sent us out on a night attack. We didn't know from Friday night about fighting at night, and a lot of our men were shot and killed at night, and our battalion commander was a prison warden at the Minnesota State Prison, and he was the nicest guy if you ever want to meet. And he fell into a drainage thing, and broke both his ankles. And he and I met up in Iran after I was hurt and he was hurt.
All right. Now, at what point did you get hurt? Was that the first day or later?
No, yeah, it was probably a day into the problem.
Okay. Now,
It's hard for me to remember.
sure, sure. Now, do you remember seeing any German aircraft attacking, or German tanks or things like that?
No, we didn't. In the flat, we could see the enemy in the distance, but not up close. But the Germans that we captured were just happened to be surrounded, and they had to give up.
Mm-hmm. But basically, did the Germans attack the unit that you were with? So were they eventually coming after you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Rommel's boys were tough soldiers.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned a little bit earlier that the army really wasn't ready to fight a modern war.
They really were.
Can you?
They were not prepared.
What did you not have, or in what ways were you
Well,
not prepared?
Just normal fighting, and they hadn't been into a war like that since World War II, so they didn't know, and neither did the soldier. Only what was given to them by the command officers. It's hard to explain,
Mm-hmm.
but they had it on TV. In fact, Cronkite was telling about the American went in to fight the Germans in Africa without being well trained, and that's true. They were not well trained.
Now, did you have anything to fight, say, German tanks with? Did you have any anti-tank weapons or anything like that?
We had probably 10 American tanks. All the rest were British, and the British knew how to handle those tanks. They were good at it. But as far as the Americans being prepared for something like that, we were not.
Okay. Now, I guess I'm trying to sort out as best I can sort of what actually wound up happening to you at that time. Now, did you get wounded? You got wounded fairly early on?
Not really wounded,
But
just
injured?
injured.
Okay, and how did that happen?
I walked off on a smoke screen on a hill, on an attack on Hill 609 in North Africa. I got it in that book from that the division headquarters sent me. about our action in North Africa.
Hmm. Okay, so you were trying to move forward, and had the Americans put the smoke screen down, or did the Germans do that?
Americans
Okay.
put the stroke in there.
And so with your own smoke screen, you just kind of walked off the
Oh,
edge of the bluff?
Yeah.
Okay. About how
When
far down?
when you don't know anything about the terrain and
Yeah.
you're going to go over it,
Right. How far did you fall?
probably 10, 12 feet.
Okay. And what kind of injury did you have at that point?
It's well, in your backbone you got a little projections off each vertebrae. Well, about 4 of those were cracked. And they found that out with an X-ray,
Okay.
and then it just the only thing to take care of it. There was no operations that would cover it. You just rest and inactivity.
Now, when you were hurt, were you able to walk and get out of there? or did
Oh,
they have to-
sure.
Okay.
Sure, I was able to walk.
So it wasn't a bad enough back
No,
injury
no.
to stop you. Okay. But then they had to send you off to the rear and you were out of it.
Yeah,
Okay. So you may have gotten out of it before the worst happened to your unit.
yeah. They put us on a hospital ship and sent us back to Iran.
Mhm. All right.
And they come back and drove weapons carriers all the way from Iran back up to Tunis.
All right.
6 of us.
Okay.
6
So how long were you in the hospital then? In Iran?
Close to 2 months.
Okay. So you really missed much of the rest of that campaign then?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then you're going back in weapons carriers. A lot of people these days won't even know what a weapons carrier is. Can you
Yeah.
describe it? Tell us what a weapons carrier is.
Yeah, a weapons carrier had 6 wheels, 3 on each side, and would carry 6 men. And that would take care of your machine guns and your small weapons.
Mhm. But it was kind of like a Jeep, but bigger.
Oh, bigger than
Bigger,
Jeep,
yeah, bigger. But still a fairly small vehicle compared to the 6x6s or things like
It's
that.
like about how could I explain it? Like one of our pickup trucks, only a little more substantial.
Right, right. Kind of like a big pickup or one with
Yeah.
extra wheels in it. Sure. Okay. And was it open topped or did it have?
Oh, yeah.
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 So you just get to bounce along the desert roads.
Once in a while.
How long did it
You
take you?
know, we're built for comfort.
Right. Do you remember how long it took to drive from Oran over to Tunis? Was it days or?
I can't remember now.
Okay.
It was a while.
Yeah. Now, when you got to Tunis, was the fighting over with at that point?
The fighting in Tunis was just about done, and the first job they gave us is to direct traffic in downtown Tunis, and it was 106 degrees.
Now, when you were in Tunis, I mean, who were the British there too, or just
Oh
the
yeah,
Americans?
British and Americans,
In
and
general.
and the French.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, at this point, what kind of attitude did the American soldiers have toward the British?
Oh, they enjoyed the British.
Mhm.
They were fun to be around. They're a happy-go-lucky bunch. This will give you an idea. Here's a British tank gets hit by a 77 rifle from the Germans and knocked out. What did these guys do? They get out of the tank, get behind it, start up a fire, and have a tea party.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
Yep.
true,
Yep.
and that's actually true.
Yeah. Well, they were known for that kind of
Yeah.
thing, brewing tea wherever they were.
Yeah.
But they didn't have much else to do at that point, I
No.
guess. So it made sense
No,
to you.
they sat right there until things calmed down, and then they got out of there. But they couldn't move the tank anyway.
Mhm. But you were in places where you were actually right up alongside the British and fighting
Oh,
alongside
sure.
them. Okay.
And well, they had the tanks, and we had the men.
Right. Okay. Because when you read most of the histories of this war, this conflict, they will tell you always, oh, well, the British and the Americans stayed apart and they didn't really work together or fight alongside each other. And so that's kind of the regular version. So it's kind of interesting to note here that not always.
No, and that wasn't all there. they, they cooperated pretty well.
Okay. Now, pretty soon after you get to Tunis, then the Germans who are left in North Africa wind up surrendering. All right. Now, did you have any responsibilities with regard to looking after the prisoner or anything like that? Okay. Now,
No,
you just
they sent us back to area to prepare for Salerno.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, that's going to be the landing in southern Italy. So,
When did it start?
no, I'm just saying that Salerno isn't the landing in southern Italy.
In Salerno?
Right. Well, what preparation did they give you for that?
Oh, we trained on landing craft, infantry landing craft.
Okay. And would they have you actually go out in ships and climb into the landing craft?
No.
No. So what did they do?
Well, they had these ships, they put these landing crafts, and say we're going to go in and invade Salerno, and this is how you get off this thing down the sides, and these are your objectives. And at that time, I was not a combat soldier. I went along with them, but not as a combat soldier, because of the injury to the back.
Okay. So what assignment did you have now? What was your job?
Believe it or not, I worked in the kitchen.
And for what part of the division were you in the kitchen? Were you in the headquarters?
It's our division headquarters.
Okay. So who were you cooking for?
Whoever was there.
But I mean, were you cooking for the line units or for the people working in the headquarters, or?
Most of it was for the division headquarters personnel, and then any other cooking. We had other units that would send food up to the front lines.
So it was a little safer than
Yeah,
your first job. Okay.
my job was safer for a lot of the Italian campaign
Right.
compared to North Africa.
Okay. Now, before you actually landed in Salerno, had you ever actually practiced sailing in a landing craft or getting off of one? No. So they were telling you, but you hadn't done it yet.
No.
Okay. Now, they send you across to Salerno, and that's going to be September of '43 when they do the landing. Okay. Now, were you in one of the later waves of the landing?
I was in one of the very first waves, but I was an actual rifle carrying
Right.
soldier at that time. I carried a rifle, but not was it a carbine, not an M1. But
So why, if you were somebody who was working with the divisional headquarters and you were working in the kitchen, why did they have you in part of the first wave?
well, this all went with the division. They handled all kinds of things, raised registration, the equipment, food, whatever. And
So-
I happened to be and get involved in the food.
Okay, so they needed somebody to look after that stuff with the early waves, and so you got to be that guy.
They had people that were
All right.
head of that.
Okay. Well, can you describe what it was like to go in toward the beach at Salerno then? Because you're in one of these
Well-
landing craft now.
It was hairy. It was scary. To get off of because you didn't get off of a platform in front. You got off on the sides.
Right.
And like a stairway.
Yeah. So you were on an LCI, the landing craft infantry that had the
Right.
stairways along the side. So they're bigger boats, but so you have to kind of get up
Like
and then
tanks,
go
yeah.
down the side. Yeah. Now, were the Germans shooting at you as you were doing that?
I can't, to tell you the truth, I can't remember.
Okay. You just did it as quickly as you could.
Yeah.
All right. And then did they
'Cause
land?
I don't think the resistance was that strong at that particular point.
Okay. Now, was there much of a bombardment before they landed? Were there naval ships firing?
I can't tell
You
you.
don't remember it, okay. Now, do you remember what you did when you got on shore?
Yeah, we headed for a place that we were supposed to go, objectives, but there was no, it's foggy in my mind now.
Mhm.
That's a long time ago.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there was some fairly intense fighting at Salerno at the point of the landing, at least for some people.
Yeah.
But
No,
they weren't-
Anzio, I remember.
Yeah, Anzio's a little different game, but okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Salerno, you're there, you get on shore, and then did you stay in one place for a while, or did you start moving?
Started moving forward and north.
Okay.
I don't know how far north, and then they stopped and reorganized, and the Germans at that time were heading out of there. But the one that I remember mostly was Anzio, because we were stuck out there with nothing. Everybody slept or dug into the ground. And I don't know if you remember McNamee, who was the editor of Muskegon Chronicle. His son was a major in the, not a major, not Anzio, he was bigger than Anzio in the Navy,
Mhm.
and he was a commander of one of the LCI's landing craft the tanks, and we got in touch with him. Some of the guys from Muskegon we were still together,
Mhm.
and we got a hold of Mac, and they had a good confab with him. And then they started throwing Big Berthas from Rome towards Anzio, and he says, "I got to get the hell out of here."
So Big Bertha was a very, very large gun
Yeah,
that
big-
fired big
big
shells
rifle,
at you
yeah.
from 20 miles away or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay. Well, now between Salerno and Anzio, there's advances north into Italy, and eventually the Germans are dug in defensive lines near or south of Monte Cassino.
Yeah.
And the 34th Division did get caught up in some of that fighting before they went to Anzio.
Oh, yeah. A lot of different places.
And so
And
what?
that's where my buddy, my best man, was her.
Mhm,
A town called Civitavecchia.
mhm.
It'd
Okay. Well, that's north of Rome. That's going to be later.
be north and west.
Yeah, yeah. But that's going to come after Anzio and after that. So I'm trying to follow sort of in order. So your division gets into some fighting around Cassino or crossing the
Yeah.
Volturno River and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember anything about what life was like in Italy before you went up to Anzio? Or what kinds of things you were doing? Okay.
That's all I remember.
Okay. But you remember now, when you went into Anzio, 34th Division is going in to reinforce the units that are already there. Early 44 at that
Well,
point.
actually, if our military experts had any brains, they'd have kept on going, and would have gone right into Rome. But they stopped, and the Germans, when the Americans stopped, the Germans stopped too. Otherwise, they were heading for Rome.
But basically, you're now in a position where the Germans had counterattacked the Americans and British there, and they needed help.
Yeah.
And they took the 34th Division and moved them.
Yeah.
Now they moved you by sea.
We had several divisions.
Right. But you were brought in as reinforcements. Now,
Yeah.
when you got to Anzio, did you have to land in landing craft, or how did you land?
Landing craft.
Okay. And do you remember what the area looked like when you got there?
Like Michigan.
But I mean, on the ground though,
Yeah.
within the beachhead area.
Yeah, it was like Lake Michigan, like Fair Marquette Park.
Okay. So there's a beach there, and then did you go inland someplace
Yeah,
to take up positions?
yeah. Everybody dug in.
Mm-hmm.
They had an airstrip. The Americans went in and built an airstrip right away, and they would run these pursuit ships after the Germans. But a lot of that stuff I don't remember anymore. It's so long ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, were your duties kind of were you still dealing with food and food supplies and kitchens and things, or?
Mhm.
Okay. And was it hard to do your job in Anzio when you were there, or?
No,
Now, except for the big Berthas, the big artillery pieces, were you getting any kind of bombardment? Did you have to?
oh, they would fire, Germans would fire at, it, but not very much.
Okay.
They were more worried about the British Luftwaffe. They come in straight
Mm-hmm.
during the day, and you'd head for the holes.
The German Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
Okay, not British. Okay. So the Germans were still making air attacks against you at that time.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Now,
They did all the way up to the very end.
mhm. Now,
In
did
fact, the last day of the war, outside of Bologna, was one of their big pushes at the last ditch, and we lost 129 guys. He caught them just lolling them around.
and German aircraft came in, or artillery? Or?
The Germans came in with anti-aircraft, anti-personnel bombs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of people.
Even that late. All right. Now, do you have a sense of how long it was that you just stayed in place at Anzio before you got moving again? But do you think you were there a couple of months, or?
Oh, it wasn't a couple of months,
Okay.
maybe a month or two.
All right. And then, once you started to move again, where did you go? After Anzio?
They stopped at the Lake Como. That
Mhm.
was our last objective for our division.
Now, how much did you see of the Italian civilian population
A
there?
lot of it.
Okay.
They became real good friends with a lot of them. When our quartermaster corps comes in with a great big frozen beef roast like that, and these people haven't seen meat in quite a while, and we gave them, our outfit couldn't eat them all, so we go and go to these people. They'd invite us over, and we had pasta and roast beef and treated us like millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Now, did in areas where if you stayed in one place for any amount of time, did any of the Italians start to work for you or do things for the Americans, or?
I don't really know, because I wasn't involved in it.
But you would just see the people in the areas that you traveled through
Yeah.
and wherever you happened to be.
No,
Now, was it a regular habit that you had, if you had extra food or things like that, that you
pretty
tried
much,
to give it to
pretty
the
much.
locals? Yeah.
pretty much.
Okay. And when you're moving through Italy at that time, were you able to sleep in houses or buildings very much, or mostly just outside?
Not really. We stayed away from the building.
Mm-hmm.
You sleep out in a tent or in the open. If the weather was good, you sleep in the open.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some pictures of having a little, like a pup tent almost, only bigger. And myself and the guy from Chicago were bunked together.
Now, did you keep track at all of the men who were in the company that you started out with, the L Company in the 135th, or did you lose touch with them?
No, just the guys that you were associated with.
Right. Yeah, and you're really with the headquarters company or headquarters battalion
Yeah.
for a lot of that time, so that.
Most of the time after Salerno,
Mhm.
I was with the division headquarters.
Now, at the
I wrote my New York orders like you never believe.
yeah, I mean, how much did you see of the higher ranking officers and commanders where you were? Not too much. Who were you answering to or reporting to?
Mark Clark.
Yeah, well, he was the army commander.
Yeah.
I actually meant within. Did you ever see him in person?
No,
Okay.
no, I never did. We had generals in our division, but and I can't remember their names. I've got them someplace at home.
Okay. Now, in the
You saw Patton.
Oh yeah, I saw Patton. He fined me $25 for not wearing puttees. In North Africa, yeah, everybody that he come up, oh, you haven't got puttees, you haven't, and he's got his aide with him, and he's writing it out, and the names and everything, cost you $25.
Now, was that before or after the Kasserine?
There was after.
That's right, because he kind of comes in and takes over after that.
He was an SOB.
Now, did you ever have to go and hear him give one of his speeches or be in the
No.
audience? I didn't do that. Now, when you saw him, was he wearing his official stuff?
He was out of military uniform, really,
Mm-hmm.
with a high puttees and polished leggings and he wasn't in a regular army uniform.
Now, did he have his own pearl handle
Yeah,
revolvers?
his own little party.
Do you have any remember anything else about him? Was he different from the way we see him depicted in movies or other places,
No.
or just?
He was arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
He was arrogant from the word go.
Mm-hmm.
He was not like Eisenhower, or like Mark Clark, or like General.
Oh, Bradley, maybe.
Our division general.
Okay. Your divisional commander. Okay. Yeah.
Our division general was a guy from Minnesota. He was a good guy.
Okay. At this point, this tape is about.
He's gonna come and pick me up at 4 o'clock to take me home, honey.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Okay. So we're rolling here. So okay. Now we talked about your experiences in Italy and kind of through that campaign. A couple other things. In addition to having kind of kitchen and food supply duty, did you also work for the division's post office?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, you know, you got a division of a whole bunch of guys, and they were sending back money to their families, and they were sending letters, and we had a regular, just like a regular post office. I wrote money orders till I was coming out my ears.
Now, how did they handle the censoring of the mail? Because see, somebody had to.
Just like they do now.
So
Just like the regular post office. And bags of mail that they cancel and throw in, or write, well, a lot of it was V-mail, you know, but I wrote, sometimes even wrote letters for some of the guys. We had 2 Japanese regiments from the 433 and 3 something else. Japanese
right.
Americans with our division.
Right.
And they had the most beautiful handwriting you ever saw in your life. And it was Takamasha was one of their mail clerks, and he would bring in this stuff, and he would sit down and talk with us about. And he was a real fine man. Lived in California, and they treated him pretty rough at the beginning of the war, and then coming over here, he says they treat us like king, and they were good fighters.
I mean, they were. I've actually interviewed one of the ones who was with the artillery unit, and that was the 300 and something. And he talked about a certain amount of that kind of thing. But they were the unit that everybody wanted to have them in their army.
Yes.
And Clark had to give them up to send them to France for a while, and he made them send them back again.
Yeah.
But he did tell you a little bit about what had happened to him, to talk about internment and those kinds of things, and
Yeah.
and how did he seem to feel about what was going on or about what he was doing?
Yeah.
I mean, was he proud to sort of be in the army and helping
Yeah,
out?
he's sure. They all were, and we all got along real well.
Okay.
344.
Right. And that was the artillery unit.
If I remember
Yeah.
correctly, that was one of the regiments.
Right. Right. And they had the infantry regiment and artillery unit. And the infantry
His
regiment
name was
a
Frank
four-
Takahashi.
Mhm. Okay. Now, all right. Now there was another story that off camera was noted earlier. Way back when you were fighting around Algiers, you had kind of a close call with a mortar round or something when you were under attack.
Yeah.
Could you describe what happened there? Was that you were in a foxhole and the shell lands?
Or out in the, when we were chasing Rommel,
Okay,
I
yeah.
was in a foxhole,
Mhm.
and that's where we got the mortar shell thrown. But otherwise, no,
Okay. Well, what happened when the mortar shell landed?
when it didn't go off, and I got the hell out of there.
Hmm. Yeah, because they at least found out where you were. The next one might work. Okay.
I didn't mince any words. I got out of that hole and so quick to make your head swim,
Okay.
and never knowing whether it would go off or not.
All right. Now, where had you gotten to at the point when the Germans surrendered? Was that at Lake Como or?
That's, well, of course, they surrendered when I was in Oran. See, after, when I was still in the hospital.
No, when the Germans surrendered in Italy.
In Italy,
Mhm.
oh, that was up by Lake Como. That was at the very end of the war.
Okay. Now, at that point,
That's the time we saw Mussolini and his girlfriend and his cohorts had been hanging out by their heels.
mhm. So did you actually see where the bodies were hanging? All right. Yeah, that was a fairly
Yeah.
Famous scene there.
That was quite a sight. And
Mhm.
the people were, Italians were there spitting at them and speaking Italian, or swear words or whatever they were. And, but we were there for about 25 minutes or so,
Mhm.
and then we got out of there.
Right.
Because there was too much activity from the Italians. They were so upset with Mussolini.
So you just kind of moved along.
Yeah.
All right. Now, at that point, did you have to start to deal with German prisoners coming in, or
No, we
you didn't
we
see any
didn't
of
get
that?
involved in that at all.
All right.
They just sent us back to Rome.
Mm-hmm. And then, did you stay there very long, or did they ship you home pretty fast?
They put us in Rome for about 3 weeks, and then they moved us to Naples, and they had a racetrack in Naples, and this was a kind of bivouac area waiting to go home on the people that had high listings to go home, like I did. I had 39 points, and you had to have 26 or so.
Actually, I think
I
the
can't-
numbers were bigger
Can't
than that.
remember the number.
But you might have had, but you would have had a lot because.
I had a lot of numbers because I was over there so long.
Yeah.
And they put us on they were building B-17s, putting in bucket seats in there so they could handle it.
Mhm.
And they put us, as soon as they got enough in there, then the high point men would get a chance to go first.
Mhm.
And we went from Naples to Port Leone to Dakar, and then across from Dakar to
To Brazil.
Brazil,
Mhm.
and we got on a brand new spanking new DC-3, and we went from the pilot happened to be a guy from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and they flew us in to Blem, to Georgetown, and then to Miami, and then from Miami they put us on a train, and I went to Indiantown Gap where I got this
Discharged. Right.
discharge.
Right. Had you ever been on an airplane before that first trip on the B-17?
In a regular airplane?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I've been in an airplane.
But had you been on airplanes before that time? when you were before
No,
the war?
No,
Okay.
no, and during the war, no.
Okay. So
No.
what did you think of that first plane ride?
And that was great. We were all so happy. And then when they found out the guy that was piloting it was from Michigan, he was our favorite.
All right.
He was quite a guy.
Okay.
He went to Grosse Pointe High School, same as I did. When I come back from the service, I went back to work for Norge. And then from Norge, they had a financial problem where they lost $8 million in the summer of 1948. And so they were laying off people. And they were going to lay off our assistant purchasing agent. And he was a man with 5 kids. And Phyllis and I didn't have any children at the time. Don't lay him off. I'll take a layoff. I can get a job. And his name was Floyd Roach, and they kept him on. And I went to work for Stationary Supply, and I worked there for 35 years.
Okay. Now, how did you wind up being able to buy your first house? How did you get the money to buy a house with after?
How did I get the money to buy a house?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I got home, I got a soldier's bonus. I took the soldier's bonus and I bought a lot. Phil and I bought a lot out in Lake Harbor area. And after a year or so, we were in a house on Baffin Street in Muskegon Heights. He said, we've got to get out of here. We should go someplace else. So my buddy happened to be a real estate man, and he said, Jim, I've got just the property for you. I said, well, I've got just the amount of money that will take care of it. So I took my soldier's bonus and I bought the lot. And then after a year or so, we hadn't built a home because we didn't have the money. We got a chance to buy our house where we live now. And I said, well, we'll sell our lot. That'll take the down payment. And a good friend of my folks' family, and he said, Jim, I just sold some property for $40,000. He said, how much do you need?
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, we got enough for down payment and a little bit more. He says, well, you tell me how much you need, you can have it. And we bought it on a land contract, and we paid $13,500 for it.
Can you imagine?
And
Still
we've
live
been
there.
there for 52 years.
Now, were you able to make money on that lake property you had? Was that what enabled you to help pay for this?
Well, the amount of money I put into it was probably $500.
That was the amount of the
Yeah.
lot. And then
And then-
increased, tripled,
Huh?
it tripled.
Yeah, the money value tripled.
Mm-hmm.
And so we used that as a down payment on the house.
Right.
And then Harry gave us the rest,
Mm-hmm.
and we paid Harry and, I call him Uncle Harry and Aunt Pearl, and they gave us the money, and we paid them off.
Mm-hmm.
And how many years did it take us to pay it off? 16?
Huh?
16 years?
16 years it took us to pay it off,
All right.
and we've been there 52 years.
All right. Okay. Now, are there any other kind of individual things that happen in your time in the service that tend to come back to you? Remember that you haven't really mentioned here or talked about yet.
Not that I know of.
All right.
I can't think of.
Well, you'll think of something after I turn the camera off, but I know that, so that's okay. Overall, how do you think your time in the service wound up affecting you? Were you a different person when you came out, or pretty much the same guy?
Pretty much the same guy.
Had you learned anything over the course of that time?
I learned that that's not the job that I want.
Okay. So you adapted well enough to military life when you were in it.
Well, yeah, and the people that you're with make a difference.
And did you like the people that you were with, the headquarters guys,
Oh,
the
yeah.
group you were with?
Yeah.
And were you with pretty much the same
There
bunch the whole time?
There was in our outfit, there was 18 guys, all from Muskegon, that pretty knew, each one of us knew each other, either prior to the service or while we were in the service. So, and some of there's not many of them left, if I can count them now or not.
But you had the opportunity to stay with a lot of the same men for a long stretch
Oh,
of
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, while you were away, what did your wife do, or how did she support herself?
I made her go to work. No, you tell them.
You don't want me on there.
Oh, sure, why not?
Well, I was working at Bennett Pumps where he was. I was in the secretarial department and he was a mill department. And when he left to go to war, I worked at Lakey Foundry for a while in the office. And then I went down to Pontiac where my folks lived. And I got a job at Wilson Foundry and worked in the shop inspecting 40mm shell casings. And I did that until one time they wanted to go on strike. I worked 10-hour days, and they wanted to go on strike for more money, and I quit because I said I won't go on strike when we're supplying war materials. So then I went to General Motors, and I worked in the office, and that was where I was working when he came home, and then when he came home, I lived with my parents part of the time and his parents part of the time.
Imagine coming home, Jim, to see your wife that you hadn't seen for 42 months, and you have to get all reacquainted.
Right, and in your parents' house. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what?
Evidently it didn't bother it.
What I said to him, you know, we haven't seen each other for 42 months. I think we better start dating again. Well, that didn't go over so good. But we've made it for 67 years.
Now, after he came home, did you keep working for a while, or?
Yes, yes, I worked until I was 7 months pregnant, and then we had 3 children, so I took time out. And then I went back and worked in Muskegon Public Schools for 28 years.
Okay, and were you office staff or teaching?
Office staff.
Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to have to make you sign a release form too now that you're on camera, but so much better, because this piece of the story often gets left out. Now, all this time while he was gone, did you ever stop and wonder, let me see, did I do the right thing? Was I impulsive, or did you just figure it was going to work?
Well, you just pray all the time, and then at work, some of the co-workers would say, oh, Phyllis, I went to the Michigan Theater last night, and they had newsreels then, because you didn't get any news and any information right away. And they'd say, I think we saw Jim. You better go down there. So right after work that night, I would go down there and sit there sometimes to watch it twice, to see the newsreel. But I couldn't ever find him in there. And that was good, because sometimes they were all injured, and sometimes they were marching off. So I didn't ever see him in those. But people were always very, very kind, and the girls all got together, and when he was in Fort Worth, 5 of us girls that were girlfriends of the fellas he was with, we all drove down there on a New Year's Eve. It took us 32 hours in a snowstorm, and we didn't know where we were going or anything, and they were sitting there waiting for us. We called them up and said, we're almost there, we're in Muskogee, Oklahoma. They said, you're not almost here. And we were there for 3 days. And then when he was out at Fort Dix, three of we girls got together and drove out to see the fellas. And so you do those sort of things, and you roll bandages, and you have a victory garden and write letters every night.
Right.
I will say this, during the service, we made lasting friendships.
Mm-hmm.
Lasted our whole lives.
And you're still even in touch with some of the people that you'd met then, even though you haven't seen them in forever. Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
It's been a good life. Heaven, isn't it, honey?
Yeah.
All right. Well, it certainly makes for a good story. So thank you for taking the time to tell it to me today.
Well,
Thank you for coming.
All right.
we didn't bore you.
No.